Have you ever heard someone say that I cannot change my leadership style because that is who I am? Now, it sounds honest, but it's a myth that limits our effectiveness. Yes, our personality naturally inclines us towards certain behavior styles in our leadership, but no, we are not locked into them. In many cases, we default to one style of leadership because it feels comfortable or because it's the only style we have experienced. Today, I want to address this in my topic on adaptive leadership for varying situations. Welcome to wilsonliling.com. This is our ministry equipping website where we offer podcasts free of charge on areas of leadership, intercession, and prophetic. And we also provide various other materials like our sermons and blog articles. You are most welcome to subscribe freely to keep up to date to what we are producing each week. Now, we are going to talk about adaptive leadership for varying situations. Now, let me make a very important point here. Leadership styles are skills that can be learned, practiced, and mastered. Think about that. Just as someone can learn how to play more than one musical instrument, in the same way we can learn to have more than one leadership styles. And what motivates us to grow into the new styles and often comes down to our perspective, to our purpose, to our desire to bring out the best in others. Here's something that many leaders never realize. Your leadership style may help some followers rise while unintentionally begin to hinder or hold others back. Think about that. You've probably seen it. Some people flourish under a particular style of leadership, but others seem to struggle under the same style and even the same leader. Even more puzzling, someone may seem to flourish for a season under a particular style, and then they begin to struggle, they begin to plateau in rising up, despite the fact that you may not have changed your leadership style at all. Why does this happen? Because they have changed. And your leadership style may no longer be effective. It may no longer match what they need in that new season of their life. So leadership style is one of those key reasons that will cause or assist a follower to either continue to rise up or even stall. So here I'd like to introduce us to this theory called situational leadership. It was developed by Paul Hersey and Ken Blanchard, and it has become popular in many parts of the world today. The core idea is very simple but powerful. Effective leaders vary their leadership style in order that it may match the person and the task, so that each follower can really rise up to their full potential. And now there are variants to this theory, and to me the one that has been further refined by Paul Hersey is the one that I believe is more practical and useful. Hence, the lesson I'm going to talk about today is going to be based on that variant. So now let's zoom in. Let's look at situational leadership. It teaches that effective leaders will adapt their leadership style to match the followers' task-related ability and willingness. So the model actually proposes that we can have 4 different leadership styles, and each will be defined by the leader's blend of directive or task behavior and the supportive or relational behavior. Now, let me talk firstly about what the directive behavior is like. This is the degree to which a leader will provide structure, will provide clarity and direction. And this may include a number of things, including specifying what must be done, explaining how and where something should be done, setting deadlines and standards, and of course, closely monitoring the progress. Now, when we come to supportive behavior, This is really talking about the degree to which a leader engages relationally with the follower. And in order that they may build understanding, may build confidence and the motivation of the follower. And this will involve behaviors like a two-way dialogue, active listening, encouraging and reassurance, and guidance that will help the follower to grow. Now, in the diagram you're seeing right now, it depicts the influence behaviors of the leader. So directive behavior, which we mentioned just now, will form the horizontal axis, while the supportive behavior forms the vertical axis. And both will vary from low to high, as you can see in the diagram. And it illustrates that there are 4 different quadrants, and each represent a different leadership style. So you have S1, S2, S3, and S4. And those leadership styles will align with the different follower performance readiness levels, which is classified as R1, R2, R3, and R4, which is at the bottom table of your diagram. Now note that for each of the R, there are 2 key attitudes to be considered, and they relate to confidence and willingness. Right, so let me now clarify something about the supportive behavior, because what we need to understand is that supportive behavior in this theory refers specifically to the leadership actions that will help a follower progress in the task. It does not describe the overall quality of the personal relationship between the leader and the follower. Let me give you an example. A leader may have an excellent personal relationship with a follower, but will still need to apply highly directive style if the follower is in an R1 readiness level. Conversely, think about an R3 follower, one who is competent, and even though the relationship will be one of a close friend, it still requires a targeted, intentional, supportive behaviors that go beyond a normal friendship dynamics of close friends. So being able to maintain the distinction will prevent role confusion, and it will really help the leader provide the right behaviors for the followers' development, not just behaviors that may be feeling natural as a result of a relationship. Now let me talk about each style of leadership. The first style is telling, and it spans from directing to guidance. What's involved in this leadership? Well, in this style 1, it emphasizes a high directive or task behavior and a low to moderate supportive or relational behavior. So in this, the leader decides what must be done, how it should be done, and by when. And the communication flow is from the leader to the follower. So in here, the leader will clearly state the expectations and provide specific instructions to the follower. And so this style should be intentionally short-term. It's designed to get movement, to get things moving. It's designed to get some early wins. Now, when is style 1 appropriate? Style 1 is most appropriate to the R1 follower. And here you can see the diagram where I've highlighted the connection between S1 and R1. And here we have the R1 follower. They have little or no experience with that task, and they lack either motivation or they lack confidence, or perhaps they could lack in both. Because of this situation, the leader must provide close supervision, monitor the progress frequently, and ensure that the follower does not drift or stall. Now let's look a little bit more closely at the 2 types of R1 followers. Remember, I mentioned that there's always 2 key attitudes under consideration here. So we're going to look at the 2 types and how we may lead them. So firstly, there's the R1 follower, remember, who lacks competence, but now they are also lacking motivation. They're not willing. In practice, it may be, for example, a small group leader who has been discouraged by early setbacks and they're pulled backwards in their hearts. It may be some new small group leaders who are reluctant because they were kind of pushed in the situation where they stepped out because of necessity, or because of that they are unsure that they really want the responsibility. The appropriate leadership response is this: we should apply tight accountability and high direction, giving them the steps, step by step, all the steps that needs to be taken. It comes across like this: this is what you need to do. And it involves staying closely involved with the situation, staying involved to help them gain small wins. You want to be able to give instructions in such a way that they can accomplish it and feel a sense of win. This can help them build up their motivation again. Now, this is more demanding because the leader must continue to be closely involved, closely supervising, maintaining the momentum, and so forth. Now, let's look at the second type of R1 follower. They may be willing, but they lack confidence. They're feeling a bit insecure. So these individuals may be unsure of their ability. And so the leadership response should be, we should provide appropriate training. We should give them opportunities to practice and build up their skills. We should give them some structured experiences which can help them build their competence quickly. And so we must continue to maintain close supervision, watch them closely. But we should use a more guiding sort of approach rather than a stricter or stronger directing. So communications may sound like you could try doing it this way, so long as, and you set the criteria. And so this allows them to take small steps, even of some initiative, but which allow them to gain wins as they accomplish the things you set out to do for them. So the typical leadership behavior in style 1, let me just quickly note it in point form, is that you could initiate movement, you got to keep things moving, you could define the goals, small goals, short goals, but easy to define, establish some simple milestones for them to make progress, convey the decisions to them clearly, give the instructions, provide specifics. You need to be specific enough in your instructions so that they can easily implement it. Now, let us move on to the second leadership style, and that's selling. It moves from between persuading and explaining. Now, what's the core element of this leadership approach? Well, style 2 involves high direction and also high supportive behavior. So the leader still determines what needs to be done, how it's to be done, when it must be completed, and so forth. But now the leader is focused on establishing a two-way communication, a dialogue, because you want to build up the understanding. You want to build up the buy-in. So when is this style 2 most appropriate? It works best with the R2 follower. One, if you look in the diagram now, it is one who has a limited to some experience now, but are not yet competent. However, they could be enthusiastic, they could be willing, they could be eager to learn. So the goal is to harness this enthusiasm in them to accelerate the development by explaining to them more, by encouraging them more, by getting them involved even more. So again, in this R2 followers, there are two basic categories of them. The first one is the R2 follower who are confident, but it's still not competent. And so these individuals believe that they know what to do, but actually still lack the skills to execute it well. It's like James and John, the sons of Zebedee, when they confidently approached Jesus with a huge request. I'm sure you remember some of this. Mark chapter 10, verse 37 to 39, they replied, "Let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory." Wow, big ask, right? And what did Jesus say? You don't know what you are asking. In other words, they're not competent. They don't understand it actually. Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. And what was their answer? We can. Can you imagine that confidence? So the appropriate leadership response includes persuading this follower R2 that they still need more training, they still need more experience. And this is to prevent the overconfidence leading them towards some avoidable mistakes. So leaders should learn how to dialogue with them, to persuade them into the need for more training. And as part of this dialogue, you could also connect the task to the bigger picture so that you're still progressing to help them gain a bigger understanding of what is involved. Now, let me talk about the second type of R2. Followers who are willing, but they lack the confidence. So these individuals, they're willing to grow, they're willing to learn, they're willing to take responsibility for the task, but they're lacking confidence. So the appropriate response is to continue to talk to them, explain things so that they can better understand whatever gaps that might be missing in their knowledge, give them the context, and make sure you give them the training so that as they're trained, they're equipped and they begin to build up their confidence. So as leaders, we need to reinforce their willingness at the same time while you are building up their competence. So the relational connection, the engagement will also help them see how this task fit into the overall mission. So one thing we have to be careful about, because a common mistake is to confuse enthusiasm with competence. We may think that because they come across as confident and they say, yep, we can do this, no problems, we know what to do, leave it to me. That's the kind of language they may use. So when we think about style 2, we're thinking to ourselves, hold on a minute, they may be confident, but they're not necessarily competent. And so if that's the case, we need S2 type of leadership to help them so that we provide the right level of support and continue to ensure that they gain the necessary experience before they take full responsibility for the task. So let me just mention, the typical leadership behaviors in style 2 is this: encourage questions and pose questions to them, explain the whys, give them details, confirm also that they understood what you've been explaining to them, deliver some feedback to them as they are going, because they may not realize what they are lacking, and reinforce the improvements as they're making it, because it will help build the confidence and maybe even the willingness. Let me now talk about leadership style 3, which is participating, and that can range from encouraging to problem solving. What's the core about this leadership approach? Well, style 3 is fundamentally different from styles 1 and 2, which we had just mentioned. This is a follower-driven approach, which is really characterized by a higher supportive behavior and a low directive behavior. So here the leader recognizes that this follower already has sufficient competency in the task, but perhaps could be held back by a low confidence or a low willingness. Maybe there was a setback that happened that caused this to happen. So the leader's role is to facilitate, to collaborate, to support rather than direct. So when is this style appropriate? It's suitable for the R3 follower who have already demonstrated they have the proficiency in executing the task, but they may be hesitant, they may be uncertain, they may be demoted, and so demotivated. And so perhaps what they need is more relational support, more than just task instruction. Now the Bible tells us the story about King David, and he had a desire in his heart to build a temple for God, but he had doubts. In 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 1 to 3, it says, after the king had settled in his palace, and the Lord had given him rest from all the enemies around him, he said to Nathan the prophet, Nathan, here I am, living in the palace of cedar, while the ark of God remains in the tent. And Nathan replied to the king, Whatever you have in mind, go ahead and do it, for the Lord is with you. So the Nathan prophet, he was providing a supportive behavior which helped the king gain the confidence to undertake the task. So here the objective is to help the follower regain their confidence or motivation. And this is achieved partly by exploring some viable options together. Perhaps identify some of the root causes that may have challenged their performance. Maybe facilitate some problem solving. How do we solve the issues that's making you feel a lack of confidence or maybe have demotivated the person? And also to encourage the follower to take responsibility, to implement the solutions. And this often is looked at by many people as the coaching approach. So what are some of the key leadership skills that's necessary for this level? Well, the leader must be able to actively listen, ask reflective, open-ended questions, help bring forth some underlying concerns, and guide the follower towards discovering their own solutions, and provide some encouragement and emotional support. And sixthly, help the follower to clarify the next steps or some of the support needs they need and how do they measure their own progress. And so here the leader's role is primarily relational and facilitative, not directive. And that's important to note the difference. Let me give you an example of helping an R3 follower recover. For example, you may have a capable small group leader who can hit a wall. After a significant failure, even a highly competent follower may experience a crisis of confidence. And so in such moments, the leader's role is not to take over, but to facilitate their recovery. So you could help them unpack what happened, draw out some important lessons for them, and help rebuild confidence by giving them some insight or helping them reflect to discover the answers. And so a crucial step is encouraging them to create their own action plan and then holding them accountable to follow through with this. And this will help restore ownership and momentum. A common mistake that can happen is a leader can misdiagnose an R3 follower as an R2 follower. You see, when an R3 follower, when the performance dips, leaders can assume that this follower has regressed to an R2, and so they may switch to a more directive S2 style. But this often makes things worse. The key is to be observant, to ask questions and draw out what's really going on. And often the follower still has competence, but they're simply wrestling with confidence issues, motivation, and so forth. They do not need more direction. What they need is support. They need clarity. They need some space to process what's happening with your help. So another thing we have to be careful about this is for a leader to remain overly directive when the follower has already become capable or more competent. You see, when a follower is ready for more autonomy, but if the leader keeps giving step-by-step micromanaging style, then the follower will feel micromanaged. They will get really frustrated. A wise leader will learn to gradually step back as competence grows, allowing the follower to take more and more ownership and build up their mastery. Let me give you a story. I taught all my children how to drive a manual car. In the beginning, I was in full S1, S2 mode. I'll tell them, this is how you turn the key. You need to hold the clutch down at this point. Ease off slowly. Press the accelerator now, and so forth. So every step, every movement was explained in detail because they needed it. But as they improve, as they begin to gain competency and proficiency in carrying out some of these tasks, I began to shift to an S3 leadership style, Instead of telling them every step, I simply said, start the car. Because by now they know what to do. And if it's stalled during the way, I don't just jump in with more instructions. I ask what happened. This is to help them process, to understand the cause, and to figure out what has happened. So that helps them to grow. And then I ask them to redo it again, having learned the lesson. Now imagine if I had kept giving them step-by-step instruction, even after they have learned how to start the car, they're going to feel insulted perhaps, frustrated definitely, and restricted. Why? Because the leadership style no longer match their level of competence. So let me just summarize quickly the typical leadership behavior in style 3 that is needed. They need to be complemented, be able to complement performance. They need to be able to build confidence. They need to be able to discuss the apprehension that the follower feels at times. We need to be able to solicit their input, draw it out of them. We need to be able to synthesize some of their concerns and enable them to take the next steps. Let me go to the last leadership style, which is delegating. And that varies from monitoring to empowering. Essentially, the core leadership approach is this. The S4 is a follower-driven. But unlike style 3, it involves a low directive behavior and a low supportive behavior. Because the R4 follower is now competent and is also motivated. They are able to perform the task at a sustained, high level, and therefore do not need close oversight. And you can look at the diagram that's presented there. And so the style 4, it really aligns with the R4 follower, who already have significant experience. They have been consistent in performing at or above the expectations. They do possess strong intrinsic motivation. They have demonstrated ownership and initiative. So our goal here as a leader is to just simply continue to strengthen their sense of autonomy, their sense of mastery, and their ability to self-direct. We want to continue to enhance that. So the leader's role is to empower the follower in their decision-making authority. We need to continue to be conscious of barriers that may hinder them, and perhaps we have a role to remove some of those barriers. We can continue to provide some broad direction while avoiding micromanagement. It's crucial that we remain accessible to them so that they can get our support, and we ought to monitor their progress from a distance so that we ensure it still aligns with the mission, with the standards that we desire. And if we see any issues and we do have some concerns, we can increase the monitoring temporarily. Until such time we see them improving again, we can step back even more. Now let me very quickly mention about communication dynamics. In style 4, communication flows from the follower to the leader. And what the leader's role is to help draw it out more clearly, so that he can just ask more open-ended questions such as, from your perspective, what is working well? What might we need to adjust moving forward? So the follower should be encouraged to provide the input while the leader is listening and observing and learning and supporting. A helpful way to differentiate between the 4 styles is by who does the most talking. In style 1, the leader does about 75% of the time. Style 2 should be 50-50. So is style 3. And in style 4, the follower is speaking 75% of the time. So in style 4, the leader's role is to listen, observe, support, rather than directing. Let me just conclude. Effective leaders don't cling to a single way of leading. They adapt. As followers grow in both ability and motivation, leaders must adjust their approach so that they can continue to bring out the best in each person in that situation. Situational leadership provides us a practical framework for doing exactly that. Its 4 leadership styles provide a clear guide for matching our behavior to the needs of the follower and the demands of the task. And so when leaders learn how to flex between their styles, they create conditions for people to rise, mature, and thrive.